Welcome back to our Lighthouse 22 series on fasting, where we're teaching on faith. And the story I wanted to share with all of you is the woman with the issue of blood. We find this twice in the Gospels. We find it in Mark 5:21 through 34, and again in Luke 8:42 through 49. This story is actually sandwiched in between a whole different situation that's happening with Jairus' daughter, because Jairus comes to Jesus and says, "I'd like you to come and heal my daughter." And so Jesus is on his way to do that when this thing happens with this woman where she just kind of intervenes and takes over. So it's a quick little thing. And then it ends up sandwiched again where Jesus goes into Jairus' house and heals the little girl. But I want to talk about this woman with the issue of blood. She is a woman who has been bleeding for 12 years and just nonstop. She's gone to every doctor that she knows, and she's given all the money that she has, and they haven't been able to help her. So at this point, she's broke. She knows that Jesus is coming through. She knows that he has performed healings before. So she gets it in her head and decides, if I touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. I won't be bleeding anymore. And so she does touch the hem of his garment. She does get healed. Jesus notices. He calls her out on it, says, "Who touched me?" And she confesses what happened. And he says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." The reason I'm bringing this to you is there's just some stuff in here that's going to, I believe, ignite your faith a little bit. I want to talk about the first fact, that she is unclean. She's not supposed to be around anyone. She's not supposed to touch anyone. She's not supposed to go make plans to go get out in a big crowd where everyone's pushing one another. She's not supposed to do that. It's just straight up against the Mosaic law. It specifies if a woman has an issue of blood that lasts longer than 7 days, that she's considered ceremonially unclean. She has to be treated as such. So she has to be put away. She has to be separated. She's not supposed to touch people. So that's the status of her situation. She's spent all of her money. She's broke. So that would be a discouragement in itself, because she didn't find any closure to her situation by spending all of her money and by putting her faith in doctors. She's going to be physically weak by now. For 12 years going along, she's going to be probably pale. She's probably not feeling too good about herself, is my point. She's going to have limitations. She's just going to not be able to touch other people. She's probably not able to go out into the community and be friends with other people or go into the churches and the synagogues. She's not able to do these things. And honestly, after 12 years and doctors have told her she's not going to get any better, we don't have this in the Bible, but if she had a husband, she probably doesn't have him anymore. He's probably found that as a good excuse to not be there, because what we do know is she's alone. This would affect her mindset. It would affect her feelings of rejection, that she's behind everyone else. So when she does make this plan that I will go into this crowd and touch the hem of his garment, it's almost a mindset of being behind everyone else, which can happen with rejection, where you feel like everyone else is ahead of me. God sees them. He sees their need. He's touching the blind. He's touching the leprous. He's touching everyone else. And I have to be in the back, and I have to be hidden, and no one can ever know. So that is definitely a mindset that can come with that type of rejection, of being pushed away and set aside, that you're not a part of the rest of the community. So she had this all in her head, that this would happen, but that she had to come out with some type of disguise or covering over her, because people would have recognized her right away. If you've ever seen a concert crowd that is real heavy, and some of them are very dangerous, people have died from them, but people are pushing and just thronging against one another. It's like a wave of the sea almost, where it can almost pick you up and move you a few feet. That's if you're lucky enough to not get thrown on the ground. So she's bold to even come out there. She doesn't want people to recognize her. She doesn't want anyone to see who she is. So she's probably covered up. She's probably got a head covering. She's probably got clothes all over her to just not let anybody recognize who she is. But in the meantime, she is being pushed and just thronged around with everyone else, because everyone is pushing everyone according to what the scriptures are saying. It's almost a selfish kind of faith. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a way of probably knowing she was going to die with this illness if something didn't happen. So she gets really bold, like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to try to not put anyone at risk, and I'm going to hide in the back, and nobody's ever going to know. I'm going to get healed. If this works for me and I touch the hem of his garment, I'm going to get healed, and nobody will know, and Jesus won't know. I mean, what kind of mindset is that? Like, we do things and we're like, everybody else is doing it. Everybody else is pushing against everyone else. So I can do that too. I can get in there And Jesus doesn't notice them pushing, so he's not going to notice me either. He's not going to see me, but somehow I'm going to get healed. But she knew she couldn't cry out to him the way that other people would call his name loudly and say, Jesus, come heal my blind eyes. She couldn't do that. She couldn't call attention to him, because then it would be calling this man of God over and go, hey, come touch me, but I'm not supposed to be touched. So it was a really precarious situation, right? She couldn't do any of that stuff. She had to have a covert plan, an idea in order to do this. So she's not supposed to go after this hem and touch it. And the only people that were allowed to touch this, if you were a rabbi, and Jesus was considered one, and there were many instances in the Bible where he was called a rabbi, but the only people that were allowed to touch that were very close family members, and she was not. So she's like, I'm just going to break every rule. I'm just going to get in there in this crowd. I'm going to be invisible. Nobody's going to know that it ever happened. I'm going to touch this thing that nobody is allowed to touch unless you are a very close relative of this rabbi. But the fringe was supposed to mean something, and if you got deeply into it, it represents the fivefold ministry, and it represents healing, and she knew all of this. She could have touched any part of him. She could have just bumped into any elbow or anything, but she specifically went after this part that represented healing. She knows if this is really the Son of God, that truly in the wings of his garment there would be healing. The only person who would ever fulfill this was the person of Christ. Imagine Jesus walking the streets of Jerusalem, the incarnate Word, the Word of God made flesh. When she reached out, laying hold of the written Word of God, the ancient prophecy, she laid hold of the tassel that was connected to the living Word of God. So somehow, like I said, she knew that he was the living Word of God, and this tassel represented the healing that she was needed. So what did these tassels represent? First, they represented the Word of God, which is always the place where we can find healing for all the needs of our lives. Second, the fringes also represented the authority of Yeshua. She had heard that many people were healed by him, that he had taught with authority, and when he spoke, people were healed. Third, there were even more to these fringes. The prophet Malachi spoke of the Messiah of Israel and said of him, but for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings. That's in Malachi 4:2. The Hebrew word for wings used in this passage is kanaf, K-A-N-A-F. It's a word that specifically means the fringe-like feathers or edges of a bird's wing, not the whole wing. All of us have seen an eagle or a hawk circling around in the summer, and we've seen these fringe-like feathers. So this word had two meanings and could be translated as wings or fringes. So by faith, she reached out and touched the fringes, and lo and behold, she was healed. We'll continue in talking about this in part 2 of The Woman with the Issue of Blood.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today as we continue our series through the 2022 Fast here at the Lighthouse on encouraging your faith. You can find these videos on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and we hope that you'll like and share these with your friends.